So today we are going to present Beyond the Book, Active Learning Tools, Techniques, and Examples. So my name is Caitlin Elbers. I am a certified public accountant, certified management accountant, and have my master's degree in accountancy. I currently teach at Minot State University, teaching various accounting classes and also first-year seminar.
So, as I was saying, I'm Kelly Hendershot, and I am a lawyer in North Dakota, and I also teach at Minot State University. I'm an assistant professor here, and I teach business law courses and professional ethics. So, before we get started on our strategies that we've identified, we want to first highlight the definitions for active and experiential learning. So, active learning includes any instructional method that engages students in the learning process. And I assume that many of you use these types of strategies in your classrooms, but they can include anything that engages students. And so talking with students, having discussions, going over problems or questions in class, scenarios, or reviewing different case studies, civil discourse or debate on different topics or issues. All of those things can be active learning. And then experiential learning is the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. And so that's taking it kind of another step. Instead of just talking about it, it's actually putting students in a situation where they might have to figure out what to do or how to do something. So that can include things like role playing, simulations, or project-based learning. And so why do we do those types of things in our classrooms? What are the benefits of those? There are so many. First, students become active participants in learning instead of just passive recipients of information. While lectures can be very valuable for students and provide a lot of good foundational information, including them in those conversations requires activity in the classroom, energy in the classroom from both sides, the speaker and the students. Second, students develop a deeper understanding of course materials. I think all of us have a common goal that we want our students to grasp what we're teaching them and really understand what that information means and how it applies to them. And so active learning, engaging them in that, and then experiential, where they're actually trying it themselves, provides them with that deeper understanding. Students can apply course concepts to realistic situations that they can encounter professionally. I assume many of you, like me, have received the question of why does this matter, or how will this ever come up in my real life? Allowing them to engage with the material in that active or experiential way really allows them to understand more clearly how it applies to them, how it applies to their future, and how it will come up, whether that's professionally or personally. And then lastly, growth and learning opportunities for students and instructors. And so when you create the environment where you have that active learning, where there's engagement and discussion and conversation, students learn more, they understand more, even if they're not the people that are providing the commentary, they're listening, hearing the things that other students and instructors are saying, and everybody grows. I can speak for myself in that when I have active conversations or when I'm observing students actually engaging with the work, I learn more too. And so it provides that environment and creates a really fun environment where everybody gains something. So goals for our presentation, we're going to illustrate some practical strategies for implementing active and experiential learning that can be applied across various disciplines. We'll demonstrate textbook resources, simulations with scaffolding, and professional experiences, and how those can be incorporated into instruction. And lastly, we're going to talk with you all and hopefully gain some reflection from you and hear from you on what you have used to create that type of environment in your own teaching practices.
So first strategy we will talk about today is using textbook resources. So we know that textbooks come with the hard copy, the ebook, but there are lots more textbook resources out there to help with our instruction. So textbooks come with various resources, and I really recommend you guys to look at what textbook publishers have for you as instructors and utilize them. So the resources are going to depend on the topic area. Two that I am familiar with are the online platforms of Cengage Now and McGraw-Hill Connect. So these are ways that we can assign homework, we can assign projects, and it is a more like user-friendly interface than just assigning a sheet of paper. They also provide different case studies, different projects, and they also provide technology. The specific area that I am going to talk about today is the technology piece. So this is going to depend on the area that you teach in, but two classes that I teach, the textbooks come with technology. So assign projects that use the technology provided by the textbook publisher. So when it comes to any technology, when it comes to any specific new software, it can be intimidating at first for both instructors and students. So I teach an auditing course and also a governmental accounting course. And both of these courses were taught by other people before me. And those professors did utilize the technology provided by the textbooks. So when I got the class, I decided to do the same. And it was intimidating for me at first. So it's worth your time though, for both you and the students. A tip that I have for you is to incorporate the time during class for students to begin working with the software. So it does take a little bit of a learning curve to get used to a software. So it can be really helpful if you set aside some time during class for you to start on the projects. Break up the projects into multiple assignments helps make sure that students are actually working on the software throughout the semester. So you don't want to get to the end of the semester and have the student just starting on the project. So it's really helpful if you break it into pieces so that students can get feedback along the way, but also that you know that they are working utilizing the software. So two specifics that I use in my courses, and again, this is going to depend on the topic that you teach if this is available to you. But with two different textbooks that I use from McGraw-Hill, the Auditing and Assurance Services provides a caseware idea software. So students have access to download this software because they purchased the textbook, and it's an academic license. So it is a common software used in the workplace. So just a little bit of a background on me. I worked in public accounting for almost 6 years before I came here to teach. And that was a software that I did use in the workplace, but kind of in a different manner than we use the projects or do the projects for in my auditing class today. So in the auditing class, we use this software to analyze data. So an example of this could be how many duplicate or how many vendors were paid twice. So we can use the data, we can use the technology to find that answer. So relating those textbook concepts to audit testing in the real world. The second one that I use is accounting for government and nonprofit entities. That textbook comes with the City of Smithville accounting software. And with this accounting software, students are able to enter journal entries into different funds and create financial statements from those different funds. So that students have really enjoyed that because it actually gives hands-on application of recording those journal entries rather than just writing them down on a sheet of paper or in an Excel spreadsheet even. So students have really enjoyed actually seeing a software that they can record those journal entries in. Question that I do get is, will I even use this software in the real world? I really explain to students that different businesses, different companies use different software, and it's kind of like AI where it's always changing. So it's more on how you can use the technology and adapt to new technology rather than like memorizing the features of a program. A course evaluation comment I got from the governmental accounting course this year was I actually enjoyed the City of Smithville project. It helped emphasize everything we learned in class. And this was a project that it did take a lot of work, but students, there was more comments than just this one. Students really did find value in doing that project, especially using the technology to do it.
Okay. The second strategy that we are going to talk about is simulations with scaffolding. So before we talk specifically about that, I think it is helpful to first define scaffolding. And you can see on the screen, scaffolding gives students temporary instructional support as they build knowledge, skills, and confidence needed to move from learning about a concept to actually performing it independently. And so, in other words, this is a great opportunity to allow students to try something out, but instead of throwing them into an overly complex or complicated project or assignment and hope they figure it out, is to take it step by step in manageable steps so that students can really gain an understanding for the material and then apply it, eventually removing yourself from that direct support and allowing them to do it on their own. So some reasons that it's great is that it combines textbook theory with practical application. And so this doesn't mean that you completely remove those lectures or talking about what the textbook provides for definitions or terms. It's actually combining both of them and allowing students to learn about it from the textbook and then apply it with their in their practice. I really like this scaffolding because it provides versatility in day-to-day instruction. Instead of every day being the same in each class, there's variety. And so we might spend a day on a lecture or on a group assignment talking about whatever the concept is that we're looking to apply. Then we'll work in small groups or do different projects with oversight and guidance along the way, but it provides for versatility in how students are receiving information and actually using it. Also allows for structure and creativity throughout a unit or course. So similar to that versatility, I really like things to be different from day to day. And this allows to have that structure, the overarching themes of what we're studying, but then also to allow students to be creative instead of it being the same thing from day to day. And then lastly, connects terminology to larger course concepts. So when you do scaffolding and use that strategy over the course of a large project or a semester-long issue, you can continuously bring up terminology from textbook and use that throughout the semester and apply it to the larger concepts or themes of the class. And so instead of just addressing a term or an idea or a theme in one chapter and then moving on to the next, you're able to connect it and consistently apply it, reapply it, and then reinforce it with students. As I mentioned at the very beginning of our presentation, I teach business law courses and professional ethics, and I have found scaffolding to be useful in both of those topics. And so I think that it's easily applicable to other disciplines as well. And I think what I really enjoy most about it is that you can use it for smaller unit type experiences, or you can use it for semester long projects as well. And so I'm going to talk about a couple examples of how I've used this strategy for both small scale and large scale projects in classes. So first, a small scale example. Here is just a lineal visual of how I've used this when we've studied contracts in a business law course. And so I teach business law to accountants, and accountants are generally looking to take that, well, they're required to take the class, but they're also using that information that they gain from that class in hopes that ultimately they'll become CPAs. And that is a topic that is covered on the CPA exam. So they're really looking for that foundational knowledge, the terms and things like that in order to help them pass the CPA exam. And so we start off this unit by studying contracts from our textbook. So we look at terms like the elements of a contract, offer, acceptance, consideration. We talk about remedies that are available in contracts, breaches of contracts, issues that can create enforceability issues with contracts. And so we're really looking at that from that theory or just foundational knowledge. And that's all really important, especially to these students who are going to have to take a multiple choice test on those types of concepts eventually. But we don't stop by just reviewing the textbook and lecturing about those different concepts. The next thing that we do is I have students review a proposed contract. And so I draft a contract myself and provide a contract that might actually be applicable to them at some point in their future. So I've done a lease for their accounting business. I've done an employment agreement and things like that. So something that they might actually encounter in their futures. And I require students to read and then annotate that contract. They have to identify key elements of the contract, identify problematic clauses, and then I have a list of bullets of specific questions that they're required to answer about that contract. So they have to read and analyze the contract and really understand what it is that it's saying and what they're agreeing to if they sign that contract. But then the next step is that they are required to also revise the contract. And so not only do they identify those problematic clauses, but they're required to edit those clauses. So they have to revise them and then explain to me why their version is more appropriate for that particular contract. And lastly, they draft a communication to the other party to their contract where they have to professionally explain their edits, why they want to edit it, and then really negotiate that agreement. And then overall, I provide feedback to them in-class discussion. These contracts are not written in their favor, and they immediately identify that after they do this project. And so it's usually a pretty heated conversation of how could you propose this language to us in class that day that the project is due. And so we have a pretty good conversation about it in class. I provide written feedback to them on all of their assignments that they do for that contract. And then we also have our contracts exam. So it really brings together both what they need for their CPA exam and then also what they're eventually going to have to do in their practice. They might not be responsible for drafting contracts or for litigating issues relating to those contracts, but they are going to need to know how to read a contract, understand a contract, and know what their obligations are when they sign a contract. A larger scale example comes from my business ethics course. And in this course, I do a semester-long ethics program project. And so we start off the semester by studying business ethics programs. That's really the umbrella of the entire course. And so, of course, we use our textbook, I lecture, we give quizzes, and we do case studies on business ethics programs, failures, and things like that. And so we look at the purposes of codes of conduct, how organizations communicate their codes, how they train on them, and why they matter. Then as a class, we create a class code of conduct. And so our expectations for one another, our values as a class, we prioritize issues, and together we draft language and discuss enforcement of that code of conduct. And then the semester-long project comes into play. We have groups of 3 to 4 students that get together and they create a fictitious business, and they're responsible for creating a code of conduct for that business. And so they, as a small group, identify values and draft policies applicable to their fictitious business. I have them submit their code of conduct multiple times over the course of the semester, provide feedback, and that goes along with what we're studying from the textbook and case studies that we're learning about in class. And so they're constantly revising their code throughout the course of the semester. And then at the very end, they are responsible for presenting an employee training on their code of conduct. And so the rest of the class acts as their employees, and they present their actual code of conduct as they would if they were in a real professional setting. And so this allows them to study ethics, to learn about ethics, understand what codes of conduct are and why they exist, and then actually communicate that in a setting that models what it might look like in actual practice. So like Caitlin, I included some comments from course evaluations. Students generally are really thrilled about the idea of being able to practice skills and apply the information that they learn in class to actual projects that they might see in the real world. And so I won't read the comments aloud, but you can see from the comments that I have provided on this screen that people generally do like those projects and like the actual application of the information to real life scenarios.
Both Kelly and I have real world experience in the areas that we teach, and students really enjoy that. So, strategy 3 is incorporate professional experience. So, use professional examples to make textbook theories relevant. Share workplace scenarios, decisions, and challenges. So, one area of auditing that we talk about is testing inventory. And in that inventory testing is counting the inventory. So, in theory, it kind of sounds really boring that you're going and you're counting the amount of items or watching that count at a business. So one example that I give is in practice, I audited a pharmaceutical company, and the high end pharmaceuticals were locked in like an actual cage. So relating those real world experiences to a topic that might sound a little bit dry really helps engage the students. Model problem solving. This also goes with case studies, actually looking at situations and how you should proceed. Connect course material to future practice. So both Kelly and I come from industry and come from actually practicing and working in the areas that we teach. And that does come with a little bit of a challenge, moving a mindset from a doing mindset into a teaching mindset. So including your own professional experiences requires intentionality at first, then it becomes more natural. So the first times that I taught a course, I really had to make notes for myself or really think through the different examples that I was going to include in the different topics. But both Kelly and I have talked about, your first day's teaching, it might be like, okay, what am I going to include when talking about this topic? And then now, after teaching classes a few times, those examples come naturally. Students truly do appreciate the real world examples, and it boosts your credibility. They trust you more. They reach out to you more with like career decisions. And even I get texts and emails from graduates from 5 years ago talking about their career, talking about any career changes. So it really does build that relationship between you and your students, and it also builds rapport in the classroom. So one evaluation comment I received, I liked how she related topics we learned to real life examples and stories in the workforce. And there's lots of comments like that as you read through my evals.
So of course, including active and experiential learning in our classrooms can be really fun, but there also can be many challenges that come along with it. And so we've identified some of the challenges that we've seen in attempting to do this. One is keeping examples or projects fresh. And so we have a pretty small department here at Minot State. And so we teach a variety of classes. And so we see students more than once on most occasions. And so keeping examples that we use in our classroom fresh, not repeating them too much, although it does happen from time to time. And then keeping our projects new, exciting, interesting, maybe timely. So using actual examples of things that are happening in the real world as for our projects, and things like that can be a challenge just because it's very time consuming. Next, balancing creativity with consistent and fair assessment. In some of the projects that I do personally in my classes, I hope that my students will bring a lot of creativity to the project, but I allow for many different ways for students to produce their projects. And so making sure that balancing creativity, allowing for creativity, but then also making sure that we're fairly and consistently assessing those projects, because there oftentimes can be like a really creative project, but maybe not all of the details are exactly right, or vice versa, a not so creative project that is really precise and on point. And so making sure that we clearly explain to students what's required of them for projects or for the learning, and then making sure that we fairly assess those. Access to workplace tools can be limited. Caitlin did a really good job talking about how technology changes, but sometimes we have issues with limited access for students to different tools. I teach a business law 2 course, and we do an appellate project, which requires a lot of legal research, but we just do not have access to the same tools that law students or lawyers would have. And so we have to be really creative in how we access those tools and access different ways to get those materials that are necessary for the project. So being prepared to provide alternatives, and then to explain to students that this might not be exactly the same feeling as if you're doing it professionally, because of the limitations on tools, is really important. And then lastly, student readiness. Sometimes it can be challenging to know if students are ready to actually perform what we expect of them. Sometimes students need a little push. Other times students need a little more instruction. So identifying when students are ready or prepared to really start those challenges that we present to them, and being able to adjust if necessary, depending on the particular students. So we only have a couple minutes left, but we did have a couple questions that we wanted you all to reflect on. And those were, first, where can active learning fit naturally into your teaching? And then what techniques have you found to be successful in your classroom? So if you could think of anything and let us know either in the chat or by communicating with us directly through our emails, we would really appreciate that, because we're always looking for successful tools or techniques that you all have used, in hopes that we can maybe incorporate them into our own classrooms.
So key takeaways today: active and experiential learning can be implemented across various disciplines. So Kelly and I come from a law and accounting background, but these techniques can be used in different areas of teaching and different topics. Incorporating active and experience learning strategies can deepen student engagement and critical thinking, and that's what we are all here for. We all want to prepare students for the workplace, and using these techniques can help us do that. And participants may consider adapting these strategies for their own teaching practices. So those 2 questions that Kelly had you guys reflect on, really think about those as you go through this conference today. What are key takeaways from different programs you guys are, or different sessions you guys are attending, but also be willing to share the techniques and tools that you have found work in your classrooms.